everyone, my name is Ellen, and today we have a 100 question quiz on the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s. Please share your score in the comments. What makes Innovid 1957 significant? It was the first oral contraceptive pill, it was the first artificial heart, or the first polio vaccine? First oral contraceptive pill. What transpired during the hydrogen bomb tests at Bikini Atoll in 1954? Peaceful demonstrations, successful moon landing, or a Castle Bravo test? The Castle Bravo test. What changes in customer behavior did shopping malls bring about in the 1950s? Consumer spending, centralized retail space, or decline of online shopping? Centralized retail space. How did the introduction of the credit card Diners Club in 1950 change the way people paid for things? Reduced dependence on cash, contactless payments, or popularity of cash payments? Reduced dependence on cash. What significant event took place in 1953, marking the discovery of the structure of DNA? The Manhattan Project, the moon landing, or Watson and Crick's model of DNA structure? Watson and Crick's model of DNA structure. Who spearheaded the civil rights movement and was instrumental in the 1950s Montgomery bus boycott? Rosa Parks, Malcolm X, or Martin Luther King Jr.? Martin Luther King Jr. What American space shuttle tragically disintegrated shortly after liftoff in 1986? Space Shuttle Challenger, the Discovery, or Columbia? The Space Shuttle Challenger. What was the name of the agreement that established the European Coal and Steel Community in 1951? The Schuman Declaration, Maastricht Treaty, or Treaty of Rome? Schuman Declaration. What innovation by Ray Kroc in the 1950s revolutionized the fast food industry? Home delivery service, drive-in theaters, or franchising of McDonald's restaurants? Franchising of McDonald's restaurants. Which scientific theory proposing the movement of continents over Earth's surface gained prominence in the 1950s? Plate tectonics, Big Bang theory, or theory of evolution? Plate tectonics. What international organization was established in 1955 to promote economic and cultural cooperation among Asian and African countries? NATO, Non-Aligned Movement, or Bandung Conference? Bandung Conference. What literary work by J.D. Salinger, published in 1951, became a classic of modern American literature? 1984, The Catcher in the Rye, or Bliss? The Catcher in the Rye. How did the development of the hydrogen bomb in 1952 escalate the arms race during the Cold War? Increased fear of nuclear war, improved diplomatic relations, or arms reduction treaties? Increased fear of nuclear war. Which iconic toy introduced in 1959 became a sensation and remains popular to this day? Lego bricks, Barbie, or Play-Doh? Barbie. What cultural movement in the 1950s rejected conventional societal norms, promoting spontaneity and creativity? Beat Generation, Surrealist movement, or the hippie movement? Beat Generation. True or false? Rosa Parks started the civil rights movement in 1955 in Montgomery, Alabama, by refusing to give up her seat. This is false. Her name is Rosa Parks. What popular family sitcom featuring a suburban couple and their neighbor debuted on television in the 1950s? The Honeymooners, Leave It to Beaver, or I Love Lucy? Leave It to Beaver. Which Nobel Prize-winning author wrote Lord of the Flies, a novel published in 1954? Ernest Hemingway, William Golding, or Jack Robbins? William Golding. What groundbreaking vaccine developed by Jonas Salk was introduced to combat a deadly disease in the 1950s? The polio vaccine, smallpox vaccine, or measles vaccine? Polio vaccine. How did the launch of the Soviet satellite Sputnik in 1957 impact the United States? Improved diplomatic relations, led to increased funding for education, or sparked the space race? It sparked the space race. What significant event occurred in 1958 involving a global pandemic that originated in Asia? The polio crisis, Asian flu pandemic, or Asian financial crisis? Asian flu pandemic. What treaty signed in 1957 established the European Economic Community and aimed at economic integration? Maastricht Treaty, Treaty of Rome, or Lisbon Treaty? The Treaty of Rome. Which global organization was established in 1951 with the goal of promoting nuclear energy's peaceful applications while opposing its military application? IAEA, UNICEF, or the WHO? The IAEA. Which rock and roll legend known for hits like Johnny B. Good emerged in the 1950s? Little Richard, Chuck Berry, or Elvis Presley? Chuck Berry. What famous film director known for classics like Psycho and Vertigo rose to prominence in the 1950s? Stanley Kubrick, Orson Welles, or Alfred Hitchcock? Alfred Hitchcock. In 1956, what major project aimed at developing a system of high-speed roads was signed into law in the United States? Interstate Highway System, Silk Road, or Transcontinental Railroad? Interstate Highway System. What iconic symbol of the 1950s associated with teenage culture and rebellion became popular in the United States? Miniskirt, hula hoop, or leather jacket and motorcycle? Leather jacket and motorcycle. Who was the African-American woman known as the Queen of Gospel, whose music had a profound impact in the 1950s? Aretha Franklin, Ella Fitzgerald, or Mahalia Jackson? Mahalia Jackson. Which international agreement forbade military operations in Antarctica and designated the region as a scientific preserve, having been signed in 1959? The Antarctic Treaty, Geneva Convention, or Kyoto Protocol? The Antarctic Treaty. What iconic American car model introduced in 1953 became a symbol of post-war prosperity? Ford Mustang, Cadillac Eldorado, or Chevrolet Corvette? Chevrolet Corvette. Who was the British scientist known for his work on theoretical physics, who passed away in 1955? James Clerk Maxwell, Albert Einstein, or Isaac Newton? Albert Einstein. What influential artistic movement emphasizing spontaneity and individual expression emerged in the 1950s? Cubism, Surrealism, or Abstract Expressionism? Abstract Expressionism. Which Japanese automobile company introduced the luxury brand Lexus in 1989? Honda, Nissan, or Toyota? Toyota. What famous American actress known for her roles in films like Breakfast at Tiffany's rose to stardom in the 1950s? Audrey Hepburn, Marilyn Monroe, or Grace Kelly? Audrey Hepburn. Which British rock group ignited the British invasion in 1964 with their television debut on The Ed Sullivan Show? The Rolling Stones, the Beatles, or The Who? The Beatles. Who was the first woman to fly solo non-stop across the Atlantic, achieving the feat in 1932? This should be 1932. Bessie Coleman, Valentina Tereshkova, or Amelia Earhart? Amelia Earhart. What landmark Supreme Court case in 1966 established the Miranda warning protecting the rights of arrested individuals? Brown versus Board of Education, Roe versus Wade, or Miranda versus Arizona? Miranda versus Arizona. Which African country gained independence from British colonial rule in 1960? Kenya, Nigeria, or Ghana? Nigeria. What environmental book published in 1962 raised awareness about pesticide use and environmental issues? The Population Bomb, The Jungle, or Silent Spring? Silent Spring. Who established the Revolutionary Socialist Black Panther Party for Self-Defense in 1966 as a civil rights advocacy group? Huey Newton, Malcolm X, or Bobby Seale? Huey Newton. Which iconic music festival held in 1969 became a symbol of the counterculture movement and featured performances by Jimi Hendrix and Janis Joplin? No multiple choice here. Woodstock is the answer. What scientific innovation in 1967 allowed for the first successful heart transplant surgery? Artificial heart, heart-lung machine, or immunosuppressive drugs? Artificial heart. Which American feminist author wrote The Feminine Mystique, a landmark work established or published in 1963? Betty Friedan, Gloria Steinem, or Simone de Beauvoir? Betty Friedan. Which American folk singer-songwriter rose to prominence in the 1960s as a spokesperson for the anti-war and civil rights movements? Bob Dylan, Pete Seeger or Joan Baez? Bob Dylan. What groundbreaking Beatles album released in 1967 is often considered one of the greatest of all time? Revolver, Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, or Rubber Soul? Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. In Northern Ireland, what political and social movement came into being in the late 60s and early 70s? Troubles, Irish Republic Army, or the suffragette movement? Troubles. What international organization was established in 1964 to promote economic development in Asian and Pacific countries? Asian Development Bank, ASEAN, or APEC? Asian Development Bank. What influential U.S. Supreme Court decision in 1963 established the principle of one person, one vote in legislative representation? Baker versus Carr, Reynolds versus Sims, or Miranda versus Arizona? Reynolds versus Sims. What major international sporting event took place in Rome in 1960, showcasing the talents of athletes from around the world? FIFA World Cup, Commonwealth Games, or the Olympic Games? The Olympic Games. What cultural phenomenon in the 1960s involved colorful, abstract art and a rejection of traditional artistic norms? Psychedelic art, pop art, or cubism? Pop art. What historic speech did Malcolm X deliver in 1964, emphasizing the need for Black Americans to demand their rights by any means necessary? I Have a Dream, Ballot or the Bullet, or By All Means Necessary? Ballot or the Bullet. Who was the influential American biologist and author of Silent Spring, warning about the dangers of pesticides in 1962? Jane Goodall, Diane Fossey, or Rachel Carson? Rachel Carson. What political ideology and movement originating in China in the mid-20th century gained international attention in the 1960s? Marxism, Leninism, Fascism, or Maoism and the Cultural Revolution? Maoism and the Cultural Revolution. Which U.S. president signed the Voting Rights Act of 1965 into law, aiming to overcome legal barriers preventing African Americans from voting? Lyndon B. Johnson, Richard Nixon, or John F. Kennedy? Lyndon B. Johnson. Which American social activist was a founding member of the National Organization for Women in 1966 and was well known for contributions to the civil rights and feminist movements? Angela Davis, Gloria Steinem, or Betty Friedan? Betty Friedan. Who led the United Farm Workers in the 60s, spearheading labor strikes and fighting for farm workers' rights? Dolores Huerta, Cesar Chavez, or Emiliano Zapata? Cesar Chavez. What historic document passed in 1965 prohibited racial discrimination in immigration quotas in the U.S.? Immigration and Nationality Act of 1965, Voting Rights Act of 1965, or Civil Rights Act of 1964? The Immigration and Nationality Act. Who was the influential American psychologist known for his research on obedience, particularly the Milgram experiment conducted in the early 60s? Stanley Milgram, B.F. Skinner, or Carl Rogers? Stanley Milgram. What U.S. program initiated in the 60s aimed to provide medical care for elderly and low-income individuals? Medicaid, Social Security, or Medicare? Medicare. Who was the U.S. president who initiated the policy of détente with Soviet Union in the 70s? Jimmy Carter, Richard Nixon, or Ford Harold? Richard Nixon. What event in 1972 related to a Washington, D.C. office building led to the resignation of President Richard Nixon? The Iran hostage crisis, Cuban Missile Crisis, or Watergate scandal? The Watergate scandal. Which African country gained independence from Portuguese colonial rule in 1975? Mozambique, Angola, or Ghana? Angola. What political leader known as the Iron Lady became the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom in 1979? No multiple choice here. Margaret Thatcher. What iconic video game featuring a yellow character eating dots was first released in 1979? No multiple choice here. Pac-Man. In 1973, what significant product was introduced by Martin Cooper, considered the first handheld mobile phone? Nokia 3310, Motorola Dynatic, or the BlackBerry? The Motorola Dynatic. Who co-founded Apple Inc. in 1976 along with Steve Jobs and developed the first Apple computer? Mark Zuckerberg, Chris Tapper, or Steve Wozniak? Steve Wozniak. What space station launched in 1971 was the first to be inhabited by humans for an extended period? Skylab, Mir, or Salyut? Salyut. What major environmental event in the 70s led to the establishment of Earth Day in 1970? Exxon Valdez oil spill, 3 Mile Island nuclear accident, or first Earth Day celebration? The first Earth Day celebration. What scientific breakthrough in genetics occurred in 1977, allowing scientists to read the sequence of DNA? Cloning, polymerase chain reaction, or the DNA sequencing? DNA sequencing. Who directed the blockbuster film Star Wars, released in 1977? Francis Ford Coppola, George Lucas, or Steven Spielberg? George Lucas. What music festival attracting a crowd of over 100,000 took place in upstate New York in 1974? Altamont Free Concert, Watkins Glen Summer Jam, or Woodstock? Woodstock. Which American artist, famous for his Two Flags painting, passed away in 1970? Jasper Johns, Andy Warhol, or Jackson Pollock? Jasper Johns. What popular disco dance characterized by spinning on the floor gained prominence in the 1970s? The hustle, the electric slide, or the twist? The hustle. What landmark U.S. Supreme Court case in 1973 legalized abortion? Roe v. Wade, Miranda v. Arizona, or Atkins v. Warder? Roe v. Wade. Who was the Chinese leader who initiated economic reforms and opened relations in the West in the 70s? Mao Zedong, Chiang Kai-shek, or Deng Xiaoping? Deng Xiaoping. What activist and author known for her work in women's rights co-founded Ms. Magazine in 1971? Angela Davis, Gloria Steinem, or Betty Friedan? Gloria Steinem. In 1972, what African American became the first woman to run for the U.S. presidency? Angela Davis, Fannie Lou Hamer, or Shirley Chisholm? Shirley Chisholm. What boxer known as the Greatest lost the fight of the century in 1971 but won the rematch in 1974? Muhammad Ali, Joe Frazier, or Mike Tyson? Muhammad Ali. Who won the Academy Award for Best Actor for his role in the film One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest in 1976? Al Pacino, Robert De Niro, or Jack Nicholson? Jack Nicholson. Which American tennis player won the renowned Battle of the Sexes match against Bobby Riggs in 1973? Martina Navratilova, Serena Williams, or Billie Jean King? Billie Jean King. What international oil crisis in 1973 led to a significant increase in oil price worldwide? The Gulf War, OPEC oil embargo, or the Yom Kippur War? The OPEC oil embargo. In 1971, what currency was introduced in the United Kingdom, replacing the traditional pound system? No multiple choice here. The pound sterling. What major event in 1976 celebrated the bicentennial of the United States? Independence Day, American Bicentennial, or Philadelphia Exposition? The American Bicentennial. Which 1970s rising American comedian and actor gained notoriety for his observational humor? George Carlin, Eddie Murphy, or Richard Pryor? Richard Pryor. Who was the author and Soviet dissident who won the Nobel Peace Prize in 1975 for his human rights advocacy? Alexander Solzhenitsyn, Andrei Sakharov, or Mikhail Gorbachev? Andrei Sakharov. Which significant peace accord completed in 1978 resulted in Egypt and Israel's ties returning to normalcy? The Oslo Accords, the Helsinki Accords, or Camp David Accords? The Camp David Accords. Which global organization was founded in 1971 with the goal of preserving the world's natural and cultural heritage? UNESCO, Greenpeace, or the Red Cross? UNESCO. Which nation's revolution in 1979 saw the creation of an Islamic republic headed by Ayatollah Khomeini? Iran, Iraq, or Brazil? Iran. What controversial military operation in 1976 aimed at rescuing hostages held in Uganda ending in tragedy? Operation Neptune Spear, Operation Entebbe, or Operation Eagle Claw? Operation Entebbe. In 1974, which personal computer known for its affordable price was introduced by MITS? IBM PC, Apple II, or Altair 8800? Altair 8800. True or false? The first IVF baby was born in 1989. False. It was 1978. What American Indian activist led the occupation of Wounded Knee, South Dakota in 1973? Dennis Banks, Russell Means, or Leonard Peltier? Russell Means. Who was the President of the United States between 1961 to 1963? No multiple choice here. John F. Kennedy. What U.S.-led military operation aimed to oust Iraqi forces from Kuwait in 1991 but began in the 1980s? The invasion of Panama, the Gulf War, or Operation Enduring Freedom? The Gulf War. Which revolutionary Apple computer was the first to employ a graphical user interface when it was released in 1984? Macintosh, Commodore 64, or IBM PC? The Macintosh. In 1989, what World Wide Web proposal laid the foundation for the modern Internet? ARPANET, Tim Berners-Lee's proposal, or HTML? Tim Berners-Lee's proposal. What portable musical device, introduced by Sony in 1979 but popularized in the 80s, revolutionized how people listen to music? The Walkman, the Discman, or the iPod? The Walkman. Which video game character made his debut in 1985, becoming a cultural icon? Pac-Man, Mario, or Sonic the Hedgehog? Mario. What catastrophic nuclear accident occurred in 1986 at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant? 3 Mile Island, Fukushima Daiichi, or the Chernobyl disaster? The Chernobyl disaster. And last question, what medical epidemic emerged in the 1980s, primarily affecting the immune system? Influenza, Ebola, or HIV/AIDS? HIV/AIDS. And bonus question, who was the influential British Prime Minister before Margaret Thatcher, serving during the late 70s and early 80s? Let us know the answer in the comments. Thanks for playing this quiz. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell, and we will see you next time. Bye-bye.